I would like to thank the choir and Cantor Joseph Malvani. And now, in this moment, I would like to welcome the Executive Director of the Federation of Jewish Communities of Czech Republic, Mr. Tomáš Kraus. And I think Tomáš Kraus has a story to tell us.
Distinguished guests, honorable presidents, excellencies, friends, ladies and gentlemen. We have gathered here today on this sacred ground to commemorate the memories of our parents and of our grandparents, their families, their friends, their communities. We have gathered here on this very day on which the whole world should bow in silence and remember all victims of a catastrophe which entered our collective memory under the name the Holocaust or the Shoah. 70 years ago, the gates of the worst place in the history of mankind were opened. January 27 is, however, a symbolic date. It stands for liberation of all Nazi concentration camps and extermination camps, those in the east of Europe as those in the west, those in Austria as those in Estonia, those which were freed by the Allies shortly after Auschwitz-Birkenau, or those, like the one we have gathered today, had to wait for more long days, long weeks, and long months. Red Army came to Terezin, or Theresienstadt, as it was known then, in the evening of May the 8th. We have gathered here to pay tribute to innocent victims of irrational hate, hate which left behind millions of dead people, men, women, children, Jews, Roma, anti-fascist, and many, many more. The so-called final solution of the Jewish question, which was elaborated and orchestrated by Reinhard Heydrich, and we just came from the Park Castle where we saw the copy of his office, which was in the very same castle. He was sitting in that office while he was working on these diabolic plans. But that was only an overture for the final solution of the Czech question. And that should have been the first act of the final solution of the Slavic question. It was then only natural that Heydrich found a just retaliation from the hands of the Czechoslovak paratroopers in May 1942 in Prague. But today, I am not standing in front of you as somebody who should teach you about the history. I am standing here in front of you just as somebody whose parents had to go through the hell of the events we now call the Holocaust or the Shoah. We know that there are two types of survivors and two ways how they fight with the post-traumatic syndrome, as the psychiatrists are describing this. One type is keeping silent. These people do not want to mention anything which is even distantly related to that history. And then there are the others who want to share everything. They want to scream out their witnesses, and they want to warn the world. Never again was their mantra. Both types I knew. The first was my mother. The second was my father. Those of you who have attended the forum Let My People Live have received a booklet in which the story of my father is included. For those of you who did not see it, I will shortly acquaint you with that. My father, František Kraus, was born in 1903 in Prague. As he himself once wrote, he lived a relatively idyllic childhood on the demolition lots of Prague Jewish town at early years of the 20th century. Though he attended schools with curricula which were German, he spoke fluently and wrote also in Czech, and he studied other languages. Shortly after the graduation, his professional career of a journalist started. That was already after Czechoslovakia was established on the ruins of the Habsburg Empire. He began as a local reporter in Prague, leading newspapers, the famous Prager Tagblatt, later Prager Presse, and several others. He had contacts in Czech as well as German-speaking Jewish intellectual circles, and he knew personally all the famous figures of that time, Franz Kafka, Max Brod, Franz Werfel, and many others. His literary paragon and family friend and lifelong teacher was the fierce reporter Egon Erwin Kisch. He contributed also to Czechoslovak radio. He even started its shortwave broadcasting in foreign languages, German, English, and French. He worked for the Czechoslovak news agency ČTK, and he soon became a foreign correspondent, which brought him abroad. But that was a time when Nazism was already assuming power. He was in Berlin in 1933 when Hitler won elections. He saw Anschluss in Vienna. He was covering the visit of British Lord Runciman in Prague and his negotiations with the leader of the Czechoslovak Nazi party, Henlein, which later resulted in the shameful Munich appeasement announced by the Prime Minister Chamberlain. In his regular reportages, he openly criticized the Sudeten-German party, which was represented in the Czechoslovak parliament and soon elicited its anger. Therefore, shortly after the Nazi occupation of Czechoslovakia, he obviously found himself on a blacklist. He was interrogated a few times by the Gestapo, but they didn't imprison him. Instead, he was sent with the very first transport over here to Terezin. On November 24, 1941, a group of 342 young men came on a regular morning train to nearby village Bohušovice, and then on foot, escorted by the Czech gendarmerie, to this very city. That transport had a designation AK-1, which stood for Aufbaukommando, in German, construction squad. And it had only one goal: to convert the town of Terezin into a Jewish ghetto. Now I have to mention also the story of my mother, whom my father married just a few months before. She and her family came to Prague right after the Munich Agreement from a Sudetenland town, Teplice now. The whole region was annexed to German Reich, and first the Jews and the Czechs had to leave. The Flussers, that was the maiden name of my mother, was then a well-established middle-class family where for several generations the males were having a kosher butchery. My mother came to Prague with her parents and her 6 siblings, 4 sisters and 2 brothers. She was the only one who survived the events which were at that time ahead of them. Here in Terezin, my father was assigned with various tasks. he was leading from some time the transports from nearby town of Bohušovice over here to Terezin. They called him a Moses. One day, he was commanded again to hard labor, and he found himself with other men on a van heading to southwest of Terezin. To their horrors, within an hour, they came to a burning village. Their task there was to dig a mass grave. They found out that all men from that village were executed. The name of the village was Lidice, and this massacre, a revenge for the assassination of Heydrich, became a symbol of all atrocities which the Nazi regime committed against the Czech people. The members of the AK-1, and Felix Kolmer, who will speak after me, was also one of these 342 men, had a special status in Terezin. They were used for hard labor, but at the same time, they could protect their relatives from further transports from Terezin to what was called in general the East. Now we know that this meant mostly Auschwitz. My father was able to protect his wife and most of her family from this deportation for some time. However, after 1944, most of the Terezin prisoners who witnessed the fraud with the Red Cross visit had to go. My father and my mother were transported together from Terezin to Auschwitz on March the 17th, 1944. After their arrival at Auschwitz, they were separated. My father was forced to work first at the Igen Farben, where they made a synthetic gasoline. Then he went to a labor camp called Gliwice, where they were repairing railway wagons, and later in another factory in so-called Blechhammer, Blachownia today in Poland. Early in 1945, the Nazis began to liquidate the branch labor camps and were organizing death marches, also from Blechhammer. But my father, with a couple of friends, managed to escape. Via Poland and Carpathian Ukraine, my father got sometimes in February 1945 to Budapest, which was already liberated. But there he witnessed also the last pogrom on the shores of the Danube River and was shocked. He was in Budapest before the war and as a reporter, and he knew some people there. They found some basic assistance for him, rented him a small apartment, and gave him a typewriter. And as he was a reporter, he sat down and wrote everything what he just came through. So when he arrived in Prague in May 45, he already had a whole book. This book, which was called Gas, Then Fire, was published as early as in September 1945. And it was the very first reportage about the camps, or the Holocaust, as we say today. As a miracle, also my mother survived. From Auschwitz, she was deported for several labor camps, Merzdorf, Kudowa, and others. After liberation, she came to Prague, and there she found that also my father survived. They met again in an apartment at Maislova Street, not far from the old new synagogue. After the war, my father went back to his beloved work as a journalist and a writer. He published several books describing the horrors of the war. However, in the 50s, another totalitarian regime started to rule the country, persecuting everybody and everything Jewish. That meant a real end of his journalist career. My father was fired from the radio, from the Czechoslovak news agency, and earned his living only by occasional writing to some papers and magazines, some of them foreign. He remembered in his articles the idyllic atmosphere of old Prague and his friendship with so many people who became so famous. He died in 1967 and could not welcome the Prague Spring in 1968, nor was he exposed to yet another devastating occupation of his beloved city and his beloved country. We are now standing here to pay tribute to all victims of Nazism and to all victims of terror and hate. Every story as Sir Ben Kingsley yesterday noted, deserves a book, deserves a movie, because it is unique, like the one of my father. But what happened to their mantra? What happened to that never again? Are we, the next generation and the generation which will follow, are we able to fulfill their legacy? Thank you.
I would like to thank Mr. Tomáš Kraus for his testimony. And we are very honored to have with us today a group of Holocaust survivors and to hear the words of one of them, Mr. Felix Kolmer, who came to Terezin in 1941 and was later deported to Auschwitz. We are very happy that he is with us today.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the 27th of January is a day of the solidarity to the surviving victims of the unique and incomparable crime of a Nazi premeditated Holocaust against the Jews, the genocide against the Roma and Sinti, and the mass murders acts against the Slavic and other people, and all other Nazi atrocities. It is also the day expressing the wish of the most countries to prevent their repetition. These ideas have been leading to the foundation of the United Nations and to the European Union. This crime of the Nazis and the whole tragedy of the World War II is a great part of the European and world modern history. The Holocaust survivors and other victims of the Nazi regime and its collaborators suffered unprecedentedly physical and emotionally trauma during their ordeal. Who survived until now has to be more than 85 years old. Most of us are more than 90. We, as the witnesses of the Nazi terror, see very often at night a nightmare, the friends dying in our umbrellas, or the victims going to the gas chambers, the flames coming out of the chimneys of the crematoriums. The nightmare will disappear only with the end of our life. We are thinking, ladies and gentlemen, today, and also very often, on our parents and young members of our families who have been shown with a kindly movement of the hand of the very known SS doctor, Dr. Mengele, and other SS men to the side of the death to the gas chambers. We are thinking today, and very often, on the human shadows, the skeletons covered with skin, with the eyes very deep in the skull, with the head and the feet swollen by hunger and their very slow movement, even when they have been beaten with the bullwhips of the SS men or the capos. Excuse me. We are thinking on hunger and thirst, which has cut our lives. We are thinking on our friends who rather has been running into the wires, in which has been the electricity power with 22,000 volts. We are thinking those who have been organizing resistance in the concentration camps. We are thinking also to our hate, to our tormentors. We have been in the concentration camps dreaming how we wish to have the organization of the life after the war and how the world would be organized with liberty, democracy, and without the wars. Today is the day of the 70 years of the deliberation of Auschwitz camps and extermination camp Auschwitz. Auschwitz is the biggest cemetery on the world for 1.5 million victims. 10 years ago, on November 1st, 2005, the plenary meeting of the United Nations had decided with 91 votes that the 27th January has to be the day of the remembering Holocaust and other Nazi crimes. This is a fate also to all who have been in the concentration camps. Before that decision came to the meetings of the Presidium of the International Auschwitz Committee with the former Secretary General of United Nations, Kofi Annan, in New York and Zurich, and it was decided to propose this day as a remembering day to the plenary session of the United Nations. The International Auschwitz Committee has arranged by this opportunity in the antechamber of the plenary meeting hall an exhibition about Auschwitz camps. We have also to remember the state act of the former president of Germany, Dr. Herzog, who, after coming from the visit of Auschwitz, deeply moved, has asked the German government to appoint this day as a Remember Day of Germany. Germany was the first country which appointed 27th of January as an official day to remember Holocaust and other Nazi crimes. It was not easy for us, the former prisoners, just after the end of the World War II, to think on Germans and Germany without hate. To lose this way of thinking was a very, very long process. I remember the words of the former president of Israel, Chaim Herzog, who expressed himself to that question on October 17, 1991, at the concentration camp Terezin, that hating is a very unconstructive way of thinking and advice to positive way of thinking. He was completely right. Today is in Germany the fourth generation from that generation who has done these crimes. This generation has been living and lived in a democracy in Germany. This is to be told by us who suffered, especially to the young people. The old generation, being as old as we are, to which belongs the criminal Nazis, is passing away. Especially, we have to speak with the young generations in that way, in the way of understanding and cooperation in Europe. This has to be our way of handling. This is the base on which the European Union has been built. It is better to listen to the Schiller's Order with the music of Van Beethoven than to the symphony of the cannons and the guns. Excellencies, dear survivors, ladies and gentlemen, we have listened to the former prisoner of Auschwitz, Terezin, and the side camp of Gross-Rosen, who has been appointed to die, but survived by chance, only by chance, and who has been as the vice president of the International Auschwitz Committee of these above-mentioned negotiations. Vám, milí spolutrpitelé, bývalí vězni, přeji mnoho zdraví a další žití v jeho plné hodnotě. Žití, které nám státní doktrína nacistického Německa léta upírala. Chtěl bych při této příležitosti poděkovat ministrovi zahraničních věcí Zaorálkovi a jeho náměstkovi Jindrákovi za politickou a pracovní podporu oblasti dané politickou deklarací terezínskou v roce 2009. Dále bych chtěl poděkovat zde nepřítomné ministryni Marksové za její pozitivní přístup pro sociálním problémům vězňů. Ich möchte auch gerne sich bedanken, Herrn Präsident Schulz, für die Unterstützung der sozialen Sachen, was wir als gewesene Häftlinge wirklich brauchen. Ich bin auch sehr froh, dass der deutsche Botschafter Herr Freiherr Freitag auf unsere Seite mit einer Sympathie schaut. Thank you very much and all the best for all of you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank very much Mr. Felix Kolmer for his testimony.
Těm lidem, kteří nám tady pomáhali přežít. A to byl Rafael Šechter, Karel Švejk. A to byli lidé, Karel Berman. Děkuju. Tak ještě teda jednou, že chci poděkovat těm lidem, kteří tady v Terezíně nám pomáhali přežít. A byl to Karel Švenk, Rafael Šechter, Karel Berman, naše profesorky, které nás tajně učili. Tak těmto všem lidem bych chtěla moc a moc poděkovat, kteří nám pomohli přežít Terezín trochu slušně nám, dětem. Já vám děkuju a myslím, že je vás mnoho lidí, kteří tyto jména teď slyšíte poprvé v životě. Vzpomeňme na ně. Já je uctívám stále. Děkuji.
Culture here in Terezin was the last fragile link with the human condition, like a thread that was courageously left uncut. Only 142 children and young men survived Terezin. Their stories, together with several other stories, will live on inside us, as fragile, close, and colorful as butterflies, in the words of Sir Ben Kingsley.
We are under our blankets, in our dorm, Terezin, house L417, room number 1. The bunk beds have stopped creaking. The little kids who cry more at night have fallen asleep. But we are older. We are 13, 14, 15. We don't take note of these things anymore. Or are we just better at repressing them or passing over them in silence? Now everyone is asleep. I slowly emerge from my blanket like a butterfly that is pushing its way through its cocoon to be reborn. I have the face of a butterfly, the thinness of a butterfly, the desire of a butterfly. I carry my colors in my hand, not in my skin. I have the beauty of a butterfly, but it's all in my palm. My wings are those leaves of paper that I hide under my mattress. I softly lift the weight, draw out the blank pages and the notes. I walk barefoot. I am a butterfly. Matteo Corradini, The Republic of Butterflies. Although it's strange to say, here in Terezin, we are asked to fly. Despite the cold weather and our remembrances, we are asked to fly, exactly as butterflies do, so fragile, close, and colorful. Here, tonight, in the westernmost ghetto, in the last ghetto to be freed, we feel fragile. We perceive the painful human condition that pervades this land, trees, walls, rocks, and the air, and is also pervading us. Terezin is attempting to fill us with its stories, and in a mysterious while, if we know how to listen to them, we will no longer be presidents, personalities, or famous actors. We will only be humans, fragile humans. Ilse Weber was a Czech Jew transported to Terezin with her husband and a younger son. Her elder son had been saved by a Kindertransport shortly before. Ilse was recruited in the children's nursery. She experienced distress for the younger son, nostalgia for the elder, and wrote songs and poems for the sick children she took care of, for them to peacefully fall asleep at night. As one of her lullabies went, the moon is a lantern and looks at the world from above. Who knows what the moon now sees in our world, and what it thinks about it. We are now in the company of survivors. We can look at their faces, hold their hands. They are here amongst us. We are also in the company of a larger group of people, the majority, who went through this place but could never go back home. In this cold twilight that wraps us little by little, our mind goes to the nights when Ilse put the children to bed, as if those nights were also of all the Jews who had suffered in the ghetto. Our mind goes to the twilight of human lives, the waiting time before the arrival of the trains leaving for death camps, the transport of executed persons' ashes, which was also made along this road where we are now. But has that night ever ended? Let's think of it now. tonight. Let's try and be close to history, as close as butterflies skimming the ground. The sense of knowledge perhaps exists in this closeness, in the idea that we who were not there could never understand what really happened inside this place. Terezin. We could only listen, fly low, get close to the truth and to words that are left to remember. We could do this here in Terezin, where words always meant something else, where work meant no work but slavery, where bread meant no bread and coffee meant no coffee, even life itself pretended to be life. The Nazis' violence here in Terezin also expressed itself in the form of a devilish lie, which changed names and things. Madagascar. Do you remember Madagascar? The Nazis said that they would take the Jews there and this land would become their country. Of course this was not true. Such a project never existed, because words for them always meant something else, and Madagascar meant deportation. Madagascar meant Terezin. Terezin meant Auschwitz, and Auschwitz meant death. In the chain of the Shoah, the true meaning of every place rested and resided in the next place. Here in Terezin, Peter Ginz wrote an article in an underground newspaper of which he was chief editor, Vedem. He said, "Each object coming into contact with humankind is like a curse." Peter knew the evil generated by the Nazis only too well, an evil that penetrated things, that stood off and even resisted the defeat of the Third Reich. Time may not suffice to cancel it. It's crucial to wonder what remains amongst us of this evil, to open our eyes to the present. The Nazis lost the war. Yes. Yes. But has their evil ever been defeated? We are the ghetto. If the ghetto survives, we will all survive. It's an idea behind various forms of resistance that originated in Terezin. Salvation is achieved through unity, and culture in the ghetto allowed the Jews to join forces and claim their own identity. Although they were beset by the curse of this place, the Terezin children wrote articles in underground newspapers and poems. They sung in the extraordinary children's opera, Brundibar, whose music and words you will soon experience. We teach children not to tell lies, but the Terezin children had to react against the violent fiction created by the Nazis with a very nice but fragile lie. Art. Children of all ages understood that telling what you see won't save your own body, but it will surely make your fantasy live on in someone else's body, someone who will come after you, even for just 1 minute. How long is the life of a butterfly? Like butterflies, the Jews who composed and played music, drawn, painted, acted, performed, taught, learnt. Culture here in Terezin was the last fragile link with the human condition, like a thread that was courageously left uncut. Only 142 children and young men survived the Shoah. Their stories, together with several other stories, will live on inside us as fragile, close, and colorful as butterflies.
142 children from schools in Terezin have joined together in a symbolic star in memory of all the victims of the Shoah so that future generations will not forget. Today's commemoration ends with the words and prayers of Rabbi Israel Meir Lau.
I think that this picture was the children lighting the King David star here in Terezin, 70 years after the Holocaust. This is the best proof and evident about the eternity and the immortality of the Jewish people, what we call Am Yisrael Chai. If you see the faces of the children, how serious they are, knowing that they are going to commemorate children who passed away brutally here and in many other camps, death camps and concentration camps. This is the best evidence that there is a hope. There is a chance for a better life in future. There is one thing you can never change, the past. Past What happened is happened. But we may change in present for the future that life will be much better, full of optimism, friendship, and love to mankind. My testimony here must be very short today. Cannot be any longer. When I see the faces of children and when I saw the paintings while we entered to Theresienstadt, I can remember some of the voices and some of the pictures from my childhood, because when I was liberated in Buchenwald, I was less than 8 years old. So World War II started when I was born in Poland 2 years earlier. From 2 to 8, many memories, pictures, and voices even I can hear. For me, the World War II was 3 items: boots of Gestapo, dogs with their officers, and trains. Trains, trains, trains. Close the trains, not knowing where we are going to, what will happen. They said a new settlement, a new settlement. So far, never anyone came back. The voices I hear is in the train stations where they made the selections. Not only Mengele made the selection in Auschwitz-Birkenau, but in every train station. Fast, fast, which means schnell, schnell. Men on this side, they are productive, they can work. Women and children on the other side, and elderly people as well. And the last words, they are here in my ears. Moishale, Shloimale, Gedenk an de Bistayid. Crying to the children, remember that you are Jewish. Don't forget who you are. Tate, Mame, these were the last words. The children cried, screamed out, and the father or the mother already in the wagon because before it was closed in her face. Gedenk an de Bistayid. Remember you are Jewish. That I can promise you for sure as a testimony. Last voices, I remember. Myself, I remember asking, if not 6 years, at least last 3 years, one word in Polish, Dlaczego, which means why. What did I do to you? Why do you beat me? Why am I starving? Why am I freezing? Why did you take away my father and later my mother? What did I do to you? Dlaczego? Lama? Why? No answer. I don't have the answer till this very last day. Do you have an answer? Read the books. No answer. Mankind can be so low, so bitter, so bad, and so brutal. And going in that dark tunnel, 6 years, and we didn't see the light in the edge of the tunnel, but in the tunnel there were some stars, the righteous among the nations, from all the nations. You know about Sugihara from Japan more than from anyone from Poland. You know the name of Raoul Wallenberg from Sweden or Oskar Schindler from Germany because of the film. So there were 24,000 righteous among the nations. It's a big number, but it's very little. Millions, above millions, European people. We were the physicians. We saved their lives. We were educators. We brought them up. We were industrials. We gave them food. The contribution only from Polish Jewry, 3.5 million Jews, 1,000 years in Germany. Not only the Rothschilds and the Albert Einsteins. What we have donated and contributed for mankind in the countries we lived there. And when it happened, this Holocaust, where were they? Where were our neighbors? The patients, the students, the workers in industry of textile in Łódź, where were they? Disappeared. Gone with the wind. And the world, the leadership of the world, where we were in the concentration camps, the names of Stalin and Roosevelt and Churchill and de Gaulle were upon every lips, waiting for them like for Messiah. When did they arrive? When did they come? A year ago, 2 years ago, I told it to President Obama a year ago. I came to Seattle for a weekend, the edge of the United States, north, west. An old man stood in front of the small Holocaust museum there in Seattle. Shook my hand and said, I am Leo Hymes, Brigadier General in the division of General Patton. I was one of the liberators of the concentration camp of Buchenwald. I know that you were one of the survivors there, the youngest. I saw in the newspapers that you are arriving to Seattle. I asked the Jewish community to tell me when and where can I meet you. I need you for 5 minutes. When I saw what happened to you in the camps, when I saw the tortured people, the Muslim suffering, I saw the bodies, I saw the corpses, I saw the crematoria. From all of that I understood that we came too late. So before I give back my soul to the Lord Almighty, to the Master of Universe, me, General Leo Hymes, ask you as a representative of the survivors, please forgive me for being so late. I cried. I said to him, almost 70 years that you carry on yourself this guilt that you are like, you must be a great man, General Leo Hymes. I salute you. But General Leo Hymes doesn't represent all mankind. Where were they? Even that march on Paris 2 weeks ago never happened in the 40s. Never. Leaders of states to march against terror, against violence, against bloodshed. Where was such a march? Look at the history books. You will not find it. So today, we must learn. The past you cannot change, but the future, make it better. Don't be too late. Don't be late. Be on time. Be aware, because terror and violence is still threatening mankind's continuity, and because we want to be forever. We ought to be immortal. We must hope for a better future for all mankind in all the 5 continents. The Lord Almighty will bring peace upon us, upon the Jewish people, upon all the world, all mankind, soon as possible. And let us say Amen. Please rise. כי חילצת נפשי ממוות, את עיני מן דמעה, את רגלי מדחי, אתהלך לפני אדוני בארצות החיים. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. בעלמא דברך יראותי וימליך מלכותי, ויצמח פורקני ויקרב משיחי. בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר, ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר, ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמעיה, וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Thank all the people who participated on this beautiful occasion. Thank you and have a safe way home.